Alrighty, make sure that is on. Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's program. I'm Em. I'm one of the librarians here at Rockland Public Library. We are so thrilled to be hosting tonight's event. First, I want to note for those joining us on Zoom, which I think might be that camera, but it might be that one. Please make sure to keep your cameras and microphones off for the duration of the event. And then if you have any questions, you're welcome to type them into the chat as you think of them. And then for folks joining in person, you're welcome to just raise your hand and we can address the questions there when we get to the Q&A portion. I want to next note the next couple events coming up at the library. Next Tuesday, the 15th at 6 p.m., we're going to be hosting the Penobscot Bay Orchestra right out here on the lawn, just out here. They are a community orchestra from Camden who focus on fundraising for local organizations, and their organization for August is Healthy Lincoln County, who actually does the summer meals, the free summer meals that we hand out to kids all summer. So they are really fantastic, and Penobscot Bay Orchestra should be a really fun night. That Thursday, the 17th at 6:30, we're going to be hosting a talk, co-hosting a talk with the Rockland Historical Society. It's called Painting in Lime City, and it's a talk by Leith McDonald, who is the curator of a new exhibition at the Farnsworth called Edward Hopper and Andrew Wyeth, Rockland, Maine. He did a bunch of research alongside the Historical Society and working through their archives and setting up the exhibition. And he's going to be sharing some of the fun little insights that he found about the two artists and their connection to the city. And that should be a really fun night as well. That's Thursday at 6:30 p.m. And I believe that that's it from me, so I'm happy to turn it over to Jessica with Marine Mammals of Maine, who's going to be talking about sea turtles tonight. And thank you, Jessica, for joining.
Thank you, everybody. Pull my remote up here. As you heard, my name is Jessica. I am a volunteer with Marine Mammals of Maine. I've been working with the organization for about 6 or 7 years now. Now, what I do with the organization is I do educational talks like this. I also am on the response team for them, so I will be dispatched out to do assessments on animals that are called into our hotline. And I also do animal care at their rescue hospital in Brunswick. So I kind of have a well-rounded view of everything that we do at Marine Mammals of Maine. So if you have any questions, as you heard, feel free to ask them as we go. I have about 15 years experience in wildlife education. So I was so excited when they were telling me that they wanted to expand their educational programs. So tonight I'm here to talk a little bit about what we do at Marine Mammals of Maine, and then to highlight one of the animals that people are kind of surprised to hear that we have off the coast of Maine and that we help with, especially because it's not a mammal. But I want to start out with talking about the organization. So Marine Mammals of Maine, is anyone familiar with us? Have you heard of us before? Excellent, awesome, cool, newbies. All right, so Marine Mammals of Maine, I'm gonna shorten it as I talk about it because it's kind of a lot to say all at once. So we shorten it to MMoME, which kind of looks like it spells mommy. So if you hear me say mommy, that's what I'm talking about, Marine Mammals of Maine. I really love that because then I can tell people when they're at the beach, if they find an animal, they call mommy, that's us. So Marine Mammals of Maine, we've been around for about 11 years now, and we started out working with the Mark Center down in Portland with UNE. They had a marine animal rescue center down there that abruptly shut down in 2014, and we were the ones that were bringing the animals to that center for them. Now, when they shut down, we had no idea. So all of a sudden, we were stuck with a busy weekend of animals getting called in and nowhere to take these animals. So we quickly started transporting them out of state to resources and centers in Massachusetts and Connecticut. And we found that, you know, when you're not feeling well, the last thing you want to do is go on a road trip, you know? So we wanted to really make sure we could take care of the animals here. So we were permitted through NOAA pretty early on to triage these animals. So we could keep them for up to 4 days, stabilize the animals, and then transport them to a center outside of Maine. But in about 2016, I believe, we were permitted to do long-term care. So now we can keep these animals in-house. We have certain numbers of animals we could take in with our permits. We still transport some out of state if absolutely necessary, but now we seem to be bringing more in from other rescue centers. We started out as the smallest rescue center on the East Coast, and now we're the largest and the only one here in Maine. So as you see, we are responsible for the marine mammals here in Maine. So we have seals, whales, dolphins, and porpoises, as well as we're one of the only organizations that can respond to sea turtles. And we'll get into all of that. But I wanted to start out with the majority of what we do, and that doesn't include sea turtles, but then we're gonna get to the sea turtles, I promise. But I didn't think you'd mind looking at some cute pictures of seals first. So what we do is, these are our 4 pillars of our organization. Number 1 is response. We run a 24-hour hotline where people can report any animal that they're seeing, what they feel is stranded on the beach. Now, this is true for live animals and deceased animals. We want to know about all of them. And we dispatch someone to go check on that animal or collect some data regarding that animal. Now, if that animal, mostly seals, are in need of care, we bring them into our rescue hospital in Brunswick, Maine. We also provide a lot of data in research. We will take samples from deceased animals to learn more about these animals, their populations, and what's going on with them out in the ocean. And we provide samples to studies that are going on all around the world. We also do this education. We do find that every year we have some cases that result in what we call human interaction cases. That means us humans, we care so much, but we don't always know the right thing to do. And so we've had situations where maybe people didn't do the right thing because they didn't know. So we end up having to bring some animals in for those reasons. While we want to save our spots in our center for animals that truly need our help. So providing that education is going to help people better understand what to do and what not to do when they come across these animals and what laws there are regarding these animals. So we cover from Kittery up here to Rockland. You are our northern territory. We cover 2,500 square miles of the coast here. We have a handful of staff members and we have a greater number of volunteers strategically placed up and down that black line on the map. Now we do that so that we can have the closest person to that animal be dispatched to go check on it, to hopefully get there pretty quickly. The rest of the coast is covered by Allied Whale, which is through the College of the Atlantic up in Bar Harbor. They have a response team, but if they pick up a seal that's in need of care, that seal comes to us. We are the only hospital here in the state of Maine that can take in marine mammals, but we do get help covering the rest of the coast just for assessments. Now, the type of animals that we're usually responding to and what we fill our center with are a group of animals called the pinnipeds. Pinniped means flipper foot. So these are animals with flippers as feet. And here in Maine, we have 4 seals that belong to the group true seals, as opposed to sea lions or eared seals. These true seals, we have 4 different kinds. There are 2 that are here year round. Harbor seals like this one and gray seals are here all year. Then in the wintertime, we get visitors from the Arctic, which are harp seals and hooded seals. So if you've seen a seal on the coast, most likely it's a harbor seal, maybe a gray seal. But the harbor seals are what we see the most of. These little guys are born in May and June. So these are what keep us busy all summer long, are the baby harbor seals. Now I want to show you a little bit about what our center looks like and what we're working on. So our goal is to bring in these animals that aren't feeling too well, like that bottom photo there, little skinny. This one had a respiratory infection, a bit of a cold, wasn't feeding well for itself. So this one came into our center. Now this is a special case because this is one of the older seals we've ever had. She was about 3 or 4 years old. Normally we see most of them under a year old. So she was pretty special, but she was severely underweight, as you can see. She's very skinny. Just after a couple months in our care, after clearing out the issues she was dealing with and getting her back to eating, she plumped right up, and 2 months later, she was released almost 100 pounds heavier than when she came in. So our goal is to rescue the animals that are in need of it and release them back to their ocean home. Now, I do have a quick video of a seal just to show you what we get up to in our center. The video is going to be a harp seal that we had a few winters ago. Now, she was a bit of a goofball. She would be making a lot of noise in her pool. And when we would go and check on her, she wasn't doing anything. Kind of like a little kid that was up to no good. And then when you walk in, they're not doing anything. She was being very secretive. So we set up a camera to see what she was doing, and this is what we found. This is what we saw when we checked on her. The innocent look, I'm not doing anything. And then this is when we left. She was having a ball. She was very curious. She was obviously trying to explore her surroundings and see what was going on. And then you can see, oh, someone walks in and she slows right down. I'm not doing anything. This is one of my favorite videos we ever got in these animals. If you're on social media, if you want to follow us on there, we do post these videos and updates on all of our content. She was just a riot. Now I want to show you a little bit about what our center looked like this summer. This is one of our baby seals that came in earlier this summer. This was due to maternal abandonment, so the mom wasn't anywhere to be found. Now that happens a bit when people get too close to these animals. So we do have something called the Marine Mammal Protection Act that says you are to stay 150 feet from all marine mammals, whether on land or in the water. Now 150 feet, that's pretty far. That's almost 3 school buses back to back. I usually do the thumb test to make sure I'm far enough away. So if I can cover the animal, like close an eye, cover the animal with my whole thumb, then I'm far enough away. Or if we're seeing that that animal is changing its behavior because we are there, then we're too close to. If we're making it use its energy that it's trying to save by moving away from us, then we're a bit too close. Now, baby seals get left on the beach as mom goes to hunt for fish. The babies aren't quite fat enough to be out in the cold water for as long as mom can be. So mom will leave them on the beach and says, you stay right here. And she goes and gets her fish and she comes back and nurses the baby. Us humans, we can't fathom leaving a newborn alone for a whole day. So a lot of times when we see a baby animal, our first instinct is we have to rescue this animal, when really the baby's like, oh, I'm just waiting here for mom, it's fine. So the law to stay away from them is to help give them space so that the mom will come back. If they're surrounded on the beach by humans and the mom comes up, the mom's gonna be too afraid and she's gonna leave. And now this baby who's dependent on its mom for a whole month, only a month actually, is without its mom, and then we have to bring it into our care. So this one was a baby that came in. This is how grumpy they are before they get their dinner, and then they're nice and happy afterwards. So this baby is definitely not this small anymore, let me tell you. We have 5 seals at our center right now. We did release 2 a week ago that had been in our care since late May, early June. They went through the whole process and graduated and hit their milestones. They reached 50 pounds and were hunting for fish on their own, and they were released back to their ocean home. And the ones that we have now, we're hoping will have the same outcome. And that's ultimately our goal. Now, we also will take calls for dolphins, porpoises, and whales. Now, while it's completely normal for a seal to hang out on land, not so normal for a whale. You're not going to see a whale taking a nap on the beach, right? So these animals usually, by the time we get a call for a whale that washed up or anything like that, oftentimes they're not alive anymore. But that is a great chance to do some sampling to learn more about these animals that we don't really get to know too much about. And so those samples go to those studies that I mentioned around the country. Now, of course, there is one other animal that we respond to that is not a mammal, and that is the sea turtle. And as I mentioned, some people are really surprised to hear that we have sea turtles off the coast, but we do. And mostly they're out offshore. They're not really coming up onto the beach for any reason. They're out in the water, and we'll talk about why. The most common one that we see off the coast is the leatherback sea turtle. Of the 7 or so species of sea turtles, this is the largest of all of them. They're pretty unique too because they don't have scales that fit into a perfect pattern like my little sea turtle replica here has. They don't have scales on the back of their shell that form a pattern. They have a leathery shell that has those ridges that help them be really quick in the water. So their shell is pretty unique compared to other sea turtles, and they're really big. These are the most migratory and most widespread of all the sea turtles. Now, sea turtles come up onto the beach to nest. They don't do that here. 90% of the sea turtles here in North America are nesting in Florida. So they come up onto the beach to lay their eggs. Most sea turtles return to the same beach where they were born year after year to lay their own eggs, which is really neat. They have a special map in their brain to tell them how to get back to where they came from, and they return to the same beach. Now, it's a tough life for a baby sea turtle because they are on their own from the second they hatch out of that egg, and their goal is to get to the ocean. Now, a leatherback sea turtle will lay 100 or 110 eggs, knowing that only a few of them will actually survive to reach adulthood. It's rough out there. Some of them are eaten as eggs, some are eaten as small little hatchlings like this one. So it's a tough life to survive out in the ocean as a tiny little sea turtle. Now, when they hatch, one thing that they do is they follow the light to the water. They follow the moon usually over the water. And one big threat for these animals is human-caused light pollution. A lot of big places on the beach with lights, hotels, resorts, things like that, tend to have so many lights out that the sea turtles can get confused at the light and they don't know which way to go and sometimes go the wrong way. So there is an initiative right now to get places along the nesting areas to turn their lights off during nesting season so that the sea turtles have the best chance of getting to their ocean home. Now, also what's really cool about these animals in their nest is that the temperature of the nest dictates whether the sea turtles are male or female. So if we're seeing 83 to 85 degrees pretty consistently in the nest, you might get a mix of both. If it's warmer than that consistently, they're most likely going to be females. If it's a little cooler than that, they're going to hatch as males. So that's something that scientists are keeping an eye on as the world is warming. We're seeing a lot more female sea turtles hatch with the warmer nests. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on. Now look at all those little babies. They're just the cutest. So all these little babies are going to try to make their way to the ocean. As I said, very few of them survive until their adulthood. They start out, the size of fit in my hand, and they get bigger than I am, which we'll talk about in just a second. I wanted to show the different parts of a sea turtle a little bit. I'm going to use my little sea turtle friend here. So sea turtles are built a little bit differently than the turtles we have here on land. They do have flippers instead of walking feet, since they spend very little time out of the water. Now their shells, just like all turtles, their shells are made out of bones, about 60 of them all fused together. So their spine and their ribs are built into their shell and they are attached to it. Now their shell is a bit more streamlined than our land-based turtles so that they're quick in the water. They are not going to be able to hide in their shell, but luckily they're fast swimmers, so they don't really need to hide. Most of our land turtles can hide in their shells, except for a snapping turtle who snaps to protect themselves. This one is just a fast swimmer. Now the back of a turtle shell is called the carapace. The bottom is a plastron, and then the part that fuses them together is the bridge. So carapace, plastron, and bridge. They are normally covered in scales, except for the leatherback that we saw. But these large scales are called scutes, and that's true for all reptiles. Any of the largest scales are called scutes. So like snakes have scutes on their belly, alligators have scutes on their belly, turtles have scutes on their back. And normally they line up in a pattern. There is one, however, called the hawksbill sea turtle, that their scutes overlap each other and they almost look like feathers, a feather pattern. They're really pretty. And those turtles are, all of our sea turtles are endangered. Those ones more so because they were hunted for that turtle shell. Anything that we used to make out of tortoise shell, like glasses, things like that, used to be made out of hawksbill sea turtle shells. And now we can replicate that instead of using the shells. So they usually have a really beautiful pattern. Now the leatherback sea turtle I mentioned is the biggest, and they start out small enough to sit in my hand. When they are full size, like this big one here, the shell from right behind the head to right by the tail and the feet can be 6 feet long. I am 5.5 feet tall. I could lay on its back and it would be bigger than me. They are massive. These animals can weigh 1,500 pounds, these sea turtles. So they only get out of the water when they need to lay their eggs or something is going on, because they're not super graceful on land. They're better in the water. Now, what brings these sea turtles to Maine? Food. Jellyfish. Leatherback sea turtles are specially designed to eat jellyfish. And so as the water gets warmer here and the jellyfish start to come by, we're gonna start to hear about sea turtles. That's what brings them here. So actually this summer, I found a huge swarm of lion's mane jellyfish. I just knew there's got to be some turtles around sometime. And we have had a few turtle calls this summer. Sometimes we don't have any. Sometimes we have a handful. Normally we average 300 to 400 calls every year, and only a handful for turtles. So I want to show you how these animals eat something like a jellyfish. As you can imagine, jellyfish are, like a jelly, gelatinous consistency. So they have to have special adaptations with their mouth to eat this. Now I want to show you the picture. It's a little bit creepy, honestly. This is the inside of their mouth. So they have these spines, which aren't super pokey. They're more kind of rubbery spines, so that as they're gulping at the jellyfish, they are going to end up with some seawater in their mouth, which they might end up swallowing some, but they're going to spit a lot of that out. But those spines are going to hold on to that jellyfish so that they can spit out the water and still eat the jellyfish. Now, one of the biggest threats to these animals are plastic pollution, especially plastic bags in the ocean, because while these animals are big, their brain is small. Now, they have their instincts, but they can easily be confused. So a plastic bag in the water moving around like a jellyfish causes them to eat it, and then they can't spit it back out once they realize it's not food. So one thing I recommend is, I'm sure you've heard millions of times, to try to use reusable bags. But if you are using plastic bags, tie them in knots before you get rid of them. Then if they do end up in the ocean, they're not going to move around like a jellyfish. So that's like the first step in helping out these turtles, is at least tie those plastic bags if you are using them. So they're not moving around like a jelly. Now I want to show you how they get here. So they're nesting down around Florida, and they're coming up here in the Gulf Stream. So the Gulf Stream, kind of like in Finding Nemo, if anyone's familiar, this is my favorite part of that whole movie, is the turtles in the Gulf Stream like a highway. And that's essentially what it is. So the Gulf Stream moves about 5 miles per hour. And just for context, the fastest swimming human swims about 6 miles per hour. Leatherbacks can travel 20 miles per hour. So they hop in that jet stream or that Gulf Stream, and that really helps them move a lot faster to head this way. So they bring up the Gulf Stream, which is fairly warm, and then they get up here for all the jellyfish. And then when they realize, it's a little cold up here, they head back down. So these are some of the threats that these sea turtles are facing. And as I mentioned, light pollution is a big deal, plastic pollution, things like we do a beach cleanup with the Wells Police Department the beginning of every summer. And I can't even tell you how many Mylar balloons we end up picking up, because people release them, and what goes up must come down. And a lot of times it ends up in the ocean. So if you're out walking the beach or anything like that, if it's safe to do so, grabbing any of this stuff to not leave it near the ocean is awesome. These are the biggest threats to these animals right now. Now, how does MMoME, Marine Mammals of Maine, deal with sea turtles? As I mentioned, they're not really coming up onto the beach for any reason unless they're deceased. Now, the most we do with the sea turtles is sometimes we get calls that they are stuck in nets off the coast. and our directors are trained in how to remove them from that. But imagine a 1,500-pound sea turtle with flippers almost as long as me, trying to, panicking and trying to cut it out. So it takes special training to be able to do something like that. So a lot of times that's what they're doing. This is our founding director, Linda, and our stranding assistant, Dominique, who have been involved since the beginning. They will sometimes go out just checking on these animals in their natural habitat, and they are the ones that are going to go out on turtle calls. Now, I do want to give a little trigger warning for the next picture. It is a deceased animal. We've had a few calls this summer for sea turtles, and we did share this on our social media, and I wanted to show it to you tonight. This happened this summer. This turtle came up on the beach in the Wells area, and it was not alive anymore, which is why it was on the beach. But this one was 5 feet in length, the shell length, and weighed close to that 1,500 pounds. We did do a lot of sampling from this animal and sent out those samples to try to get an idea of what happened to this animal. We didn't find any obvious signs of what had happened to it. And there's some decomposition happening already in this picture. So we couldn't find any reason why this animal came up onto shore, but we're hoping to learn more from these samples. So these are the turtle calls that we're getting, but these are the turtles just off of our shores, these giant leatherbacks. Now we do also get some of the other ones, like green sea turtles will come up this way, and I'm going to show you what that looks like when they need a little bit of help. So this is one that was cut free from a net and taking off. This is kind of what you'll see of them in the water, is that distinct shell. So you can really tell that they're leatherback, and that's just what that one looks like down below. Now, what's really cool is there's new devices out that are called turtle excluder devices, also known as TED, turtle excluder devices. So a lot of times, like I mentioned, we're finding these animals stuck in nets or ropes, things like that. So these nets are have that special hinge door that turtles are big enough to push open and get out, but the things that they're fishing for are not. So this is a way to get turtles out of those nets so that, we have less and less of them getting stuck that way. They do spend the majority of their time in the water, and they can hold their breath for quite some time, but they still will need to surface for a breath of air every once in a while. These animals are really interesting because they are able to, when they take in a breath, they're able to absorb more oxygen than we can, and they can store oxygen in their muscles. They have more red blood cells that are having traveling oxygen to and from different parts of the body. So they take in more oxygen and actually can do more with it than we can, which is why they can stay underwater a lot longer. But they still need to come up and breathe. So this is really neat. Now, the struggle is introducing new equipment like this. It's costly, and that would require people to spend money to use it or to buy it and use it, which might not be in the cards for everybody. So hopefully we can have some initiative down the road that these are just, given to people to use to help prevent these strandings. Now I want to show you what it looks like when these turtles come into a rescue center. Now I mentioned we don't bring in sea turtles, but our friends down in Massachusetts at the National Marine Life Center, they do rescue sea turtles. Now we're not seeing this happen here in Maine, but we are seeing this happen in Massachusetts, that they may not hop in the Gulf Stream to head down quick enough and they get a little too cold. And that's what we call cold stunned, if you've heard of that. And when a reptile is cold stunned, their body isn't functioning the way that it should be. Everything is running slower. Since they are ectothermic, they rely on their environment to provide them with their body heat. So they do get a little cold stunned, and they will come into rescue hospitals like the National Marine Life Center. And I believe the New England Aquarium helps sea turtles as well, or at least they used to. So these are some sea turtles that came into their rescue hospital. There is a band on one of their flippers just to identify them. This one has a number on its shell, again, to identify it. That first one is sitting on a towel on a heat pad, warming up. I believe at sometimes they've had just a handful of sea turtles, but sometimes when it rains, it pours. And I have heard that they had up to 100 sea turtles one year. So they're basically warming them back up and getting their body functioning again, and then introducing them back into the water to move those muscles and to start swimming again. Now, there are some rescue centers. I went to a sea turtle rescue hospital in Florida, and they get turtles that sometimes might get hit by a boat, maybe have a little crack in their shell, and they take on a lot of oxygen in that wound, and it makes them a little buoyant. They call it bubble butt because their butt floats up to the surface, and they're no longer able to go down underwater. So if you ever see pictures of sea turtles at rescue hospitals where they have weights on their back, that's to help them be able to go down underwater until all the oxygen bubbles are out of their shell. So if you're wondering, how do they go from being in Massachusetts to warmer water when it's cold after they recover from being cold stunned? They fly. They fly. So this is an organization called Turtles Fly Too, which actually will fly sea turtles from colder regions to warmer regions after they've been through their rescue center and they're feeling better, to get them down back to their tropical water so they don't have to be put back in the cold water that cold stunned them in the first place. So it's hard to tell, but each of these boxes has a sea turtle in it. So once they have enough, they will fly them down. This organization is really great. They fly a lot of wildlife and animals in rescue centers to different places, but their main focus is sea turtles. So what we should do if we find a stranded animal, as I mentioned, there are laws around getting too close to these animals, mostly because these animals will start to have a stress response. Just like us humans, we can get stressed, and sometimes that only shows internally. That might be internally happening to these animals, and we have no way to know it. So staying back, giving them their space is really important, and then giving us a call. And like I mentioned, whether it's alive or deceased, we're gonna send somebody to take a look at that animal. Now we're hoping that when we have someone go, they will find that that animal is fine, just resting, and is gonna be okay, and we just educate the people that are there. And then we, let it do its thing. Now, of course, there are some that we do need to end up bringing in. But one thing that I like to mention is we hear this a lot. We might get 20 phone calls for the same seal on the beach. And every single one of them says, I just approached it for a minute. I just approached it really quickly to take a picture, or I just went close enough to take a look at it. But just doing that for a minute and 20 people doing that, that's a lot of time added up. So that's why these animals need their space. If they're not feeling well, we don't want to exacerbate that. So different ways that we can help these animals. I mentioned some of those plastic pollution solutions. Also, educating others, letting people know what they should and shouldn't do when they're on the beach with an animal. You can let them know, hey, seals are out of the water all the time. It's totally normal. They don't need to eat your hot dog. They're not gonna like that. So spreading some education, knowing who to call, staying back and away from these animals. And also a few other things that we have. We do pollution collection, litter collection, picking up anything that you find on the beach. We talked about this briefly. This is one of our volunteers, Katie, and her two sons that help us out quite a bit. This was right after we released a couple seals back into the ocean. They spent the next hour picking up the trash on the beach so that our little seals that just got released didn't have to deal with it. Also, this is our website at the top there. And we do have an Amazon wish list. That means that we have all the supplies that we need to care for the animals or to help sea turtles, things like that. They're all on our Amazon wish list. People can purchase those if they'd like to, and it gets sent directly to us to care directly for these animals. We also have a lot of cute seal merch on our website. We're also on all these social media networks, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. On our website, you can sign up for our email list, and once a month we send out a video of what's going on in our center. Usually it's cute seal stuff. It's not a whole lot of turtle stuff, since our main focus on the number of calls we get are the seals. But you can keep an eye on our patients that we have. We also will let you know when we're about to release some seals. If we're able to do a public release, we announce that. Sometimes it's in the news, and we invite the public to come and watch these animals go back into their home. It's a really exciting experience to get to witness them bounce their way back into the water. Also, the last thing I'll mention is our biggest fundraiser of the year is coming up in October. We do a 5K run and walk, and a lot of people do walk it. I usually walk it if I do it, if I'm not helping out at it, but it's a really beautiful walk down on Hermit Island in Phippsburg. If anyone's familiar with that, it's beautiful. The campground is closed for the winter, but they open it up to us to use for our 5K, and it's just a walk through the woods or a run through the woods and along the ocean. We have different activities for kids to do, and it's a lot of fun. And you can bring your dog if you have one. But anyway, that's October 14th this year. And these are, like I mentioned, our biggest fundraisers of the year, and just a fun way to get the public gathered, our community, and show them what we're working on and what everyone is helping us to accomplish. So this is our hotline down at the bottom here. If you want to have that, if you frequent the water, it's a good number to have to know exactly who to call. I also have some stickers on the table for those of you that are in person. If you want to grab one of those, you can, and that has the phone number on it as well. I just want to thank you all so much for joining me tonight and learning about our organization, and I will open it up to any questions that you have. And if you want to head out, make sure you grab a sticker on your way. I will say there's a poster up here of the marine mammals we have on the East Coast, and this bone right here is a rib from a minke whale. So if you're excited to say you've touched a whale bone, feel free to check that out. But anyway, thank you all so much for coming in, and feel free to ask any questions. Everyone watching on Zoom, if they have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those as well. Yes.
Is your organization involved in the whale that just washed up here in Rockland?
Yes, yep, we're the ones that'll get the call for that, and we do what we can with those whales. Sometimes it's pulling them back out into the ocean, sometimes it's collecting it for further research. I'm not sure exactly what happened to that one, but we are the ones that would respond to that, and we would get samples from that animal and try to figure out what happened to it. Yeah, I said we only get a handful of sea turtle calls. We probably get just a few more whale calls. We've gotten a few dolphin calls, porpoises, things like that, but the majority are the seals. Yes.
How fast can you see turtles swim? Very.
It does vary by species. The leatherback is around 20 miles per hour, and I would imagine the other ones might be, some of them might be quicker, some of them might be a little bit slower.
Do we know anything about how are sea turtles and land turtles related, and at some point they split off from each other?
Yeah, you know,
About the evolution?
that's a great question. Did the turtles and sea turtles kind of just split off? They are related. I don't know exactly their evolutionary history, and how they split off, but they are related to each other. Great question. Awesome. Well, do we have any Zoom questions? Awesome. If you think of anything else, feel free to come on up and ask me. Otherwise, feel free to check out the stuff up here. And thank you all so much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.